The Orion sector was a graveyard. The husks of warships drifted endlessly, their jagged hulls catching faint starlight like broken teeth. This was where battles came to die, and where scavengers like Captain Daniel Reeves came to gamble with death for scraps. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair of the Wayfarer, his patched salvager barely holding together after years of abuse. His scanners ticked over constantly, mapping out twisted wrecks. The sector was silent, but silence in space never meant safety. He had heard stories about pirate bands haunting the wrecks, automated Kyrath drones still roaming, even gravity mines drifting unnoticed until they tore a ship apart. But the real danger wasn't any of those. The real danger was staying still long enough for the Kyrath fleet patrols to catch you. He muttered to himself, "One good find, Danny boy. One score big enough to keep Earth's ships flying." The Wayfarer's sensors spiked. A weak energy signature pulsed from a derelict Kyrath dreadnought ahead. The thing was massive, its hull ripped apart as if some god had clawed it open. Most salvagers avoided Kyrath wrecks. The Dominion built traps into their ships, auto turrets, viral codes that infected boarding systems, sometimes even hidden warriors left behind like vipers waiting for prey. But Daniel couldn't ignore the signal. The colonies needed power cores, advanced alloys, anything. He locked in a docking sequence, the Wayfarer's magnetic clamps gripping the dreadnought's twisted steel. His suit sealed with a hiss, helmet lights flaring as he stepped into the alien tomb. Inside, the air was stale, metallic. Flickering emergency lights cast long shadows across shattered corridors. Alien glyphs glowed faintly on the walls, the language of conquerors who had broken half the galaxy. Daniel's boots crunched on glassy shards of armor. He moved carefully, rifle slung low, eyes sweeping for movement. The signal grew stronger, guiding him down to what had once been a cargo bay. The doors were fused half open, torn by explosions. He squeezed through, his heart pounding harder than he wanted to admit. What he found inside stopped him cold, chains, heavy, jagged restraints bolted to the floor, and bound within them, something alive. At first glance, he thought it was a machine, some experiment abandoned by the Kyrath. The figure's skin shimmered like brushed steel, pale with veins of glowing blue light. But then her chest rose and fell. She was breathing. Her eyes fluttered open, pupils glowing faintly like embers. Daniel froze. She wasn't Kyrath. Her form was close to human, delicate yet alien. Hair like strands of silver framed her face, though most of it was tangled, dirtied by time. The collar around her neck pulsed with the same energy that had drawn him here. Her voice was faint, cracked like an old instrument. "You are not Kyrath." Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle. "You're alive. How long have you been down here?" Her head tilted, chains rattling. "Time lost. They drained me, used me, then cast me aside." Something in her tone wasn't fear. It was bitterness, exhaustion so deep it sounded like she'd already given up. He recognized it because he'd felt it before, in trenches on distant moons, where soldiers stopped hoping for rescue. Daniel stepped closer, studying the locks. They were alien tech, pulsing faintly with power. "Name?" he asked. She blinked slowly as if remembering. "Lyra. Elyndari." The word hit him. Elyndari. That species was supposed to be extinct, wiped out in the Kyrath's early crusades. And yet here one was, chained and abandoned in a ruined ship. "You should have left me," she whispered, almost pleading. Daniel shook his head. "Not my style." He dropped his rifle, pulling tools from his belt. Sparks flew as he forced the locks open. Each shackle resisted, powered by strange alien energy, but he'd broken into worse. When the final clasp snapped free, Lyra slumped forward. He caught her before she hit the ground. She was surprisingly light, trembling like a leaf in his arms. Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was something new inside them, not just despair, but confusion. "Why?" she asked, barely audible. Daniel didn't have a heroic speech. He was just a salvager, one man scraping through the ruins of wars he hadn't started. But the answer came easy. "Because you're alive, and that's enough." He carried her back through the dead corridors, every sense screaming that this was a mistake, that freeing her would bring more trouble than he could imagine. But as her faint breath warmed the inside of his suit, Daniel knew he couldn't have done anything else. When the airlock of the Wayfarer sealed behind them, he laid her gently on the medical cot. She turned her face toward him, whispering again before exhaustion claimed her. "Not Kirath. Human." Daniel sat beside her, staring out at the endless graveyard of ships. He didn't know who she really was, what she carried, or why the Kirath had abandoned her. But one thing was clear. He hadn't just found salvage. He had found someone who mattered. Someone the Kirath had tried to erase from existence, and Daniel Reeves wasn't the kind of man to let them succeed. The Wayfarer's engines purred quietly as Daniel guided the ship away from the dead Kirath dreadnought. In the med bay, Lyra rested beneath a blanket of woven synth fiber. Her breathing had steadied, but her eyes flicked open whenever the ship shifted. Daniel kept checking on her between navigation sweeps. He didn't trust strangers, and he especially didn't trust aliens he didn't understand. But something in her face reminded him of soldiers he'd carried off battlefields, those who had seen too much and lost too much, yet still clung stubbornly to life. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steadier. "You pulled me from the dark, but do you know what you risked?" Daniel leaned against the medbay doorway. "That's my job. Risking things no one else will." Her gaze hardened, blue light pulsing faintly in her eyes. "The Kirath left me chained for a reason. They tore my people apart because of what I know." Daniel folded his arms. "Then start talking. Because if they wanted you dead, they wouldn't have kept you alive. That means you've got something they couldn't risk destroying." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether a human could be trusted. Finally, she said a single word. "Starvale." The word meant nothing to him, but the way she said it carried weight, like a secret heavy enough to change the galaxy. Lyra sat up, wincing at the effort. "It is not a weapon, not in its true form. My people, Elyndari, were guardians. We preserved knowledge of a shield that could protect entire worlds from destruction. It is light woven into matter, a barrier against annihilation." Daniel frowned. "And the Kirath want it. They believe they can twist it. Corrupt it. To them, everything that defends can be turned into something that destroys." Her voice cracked with fury. "That is why they hunted us. That is why they chained me." Daniel's stomach knotted. Humanity was already on its knees. Colonies burned weekly. Earth's fleets were losing ships faster than they could build them. If the Kirath turned some mythical defense into an ultimate weapon, there wouldn't be a war left to fight, just surrender or extinction. Lyra looked down at her hands. Blue threads of energy flickered faintly along her skin, scars of the experiments she'd endured. They could not extract the knowledge directly. Our memory is not written, it is sung into our essence. When they failed to break me, they discarded me. Daniel exhaled slowly. "And now you're on my ship, which means their failure just became my problem." She tilted her head, studying him. "You speak as though your life is cheap." He gave a humorless smile. "Compared to what's at stake, it is." For the first time, she laughed. It was soft, almost disbelieving. "Humans, you burn like sparks, so brief, so reckless, but so bright." The moment passed quickly. The Wayfarer's console blared a sharp alarm. Daniel swore and rushed to the cockpit. Lyra followed unsteadily, bracing herself against the walls. On the display, crimson markers bloomed, Kirath hunters. Small, fast attack ships designed to sweep sectors for stragglers. And they were closing fast. "They traced my collar," Lyra said bitterly. "I should have known. They marked me like bait." Daniel slid into the pilot's chair, fingers flying across controls. "Then we'll just have to show them they picked the wrong bait." Lyra placed a trembling hand on the console. Energy flickered where her skin touched the controls, stabilizing the ship's failing shields. "I can hold them longer than your systems allow." "But it will drain me." Daniel gave her a sharp glance. "No dying on my ship, got it?" Her lips twitched in the faintest smile. "You sound as though you command soldiers." "I used to," he muttered, powering up weapons. "Now I just command myself." The Kirath ships appeared on the forward screen, sleek predators cutting through the void. Weapons lit like claws in the dark. Lyra's voice dropped low, almost a whisper. "Daniel, and if they take me again, kill me before you let them." He gritted his teeth. "Not happening. Promise me," she pressed. "The galaxy cannot afford for them to tear Starvale's secret out of me. Even death would be mercy compared to what they do." Daniel didn't answer. His hands were steady on the controls, eyes locked on the hunters closing in. But his silence was answer enough. He wasn't going to let them have her. He wasn't going to let them win. The Wayfarer's engines roared as Daniel pushed the salvager far beyond safe limits. The ship bucked and groaned, but he held it together. Lyra braced herself beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars rushing past. For the first time since she had been chained in darkness, Lyra felt something stir in her chest. Not despair, not bitterness, but something she had thought impossible. Hope, and it was because of him. The Wayfarer shuddered as the first barrage slammed into its shields. Daniel's cockpit lit up in red warnings, alarms howling like wounded animals. The Kirath hunters had locked on, 3 of them darting in from different vectors, their plasma cannons spitting molten light. Daniel cursed under his breath, yanking the ship into a hard roll. The salvager wasn't built for combat. It was a patched-up hauler with jury-rigged thrusters and second-hand weapons. Against Kirath interceptors, it was like throwing a fishing boat into a storm of sharks. "Keep the shields alive," Daniel barked. Lyra gripped the console beside him, her eyes blazing faint blue as energy coursed through her fingertips. The shield generator, an old unit Daniel had nearly scrapped a dozen times, suddenly pulsed brighter, holding against another strike that should have torn them in half. Sweat beaded on her brow. "They strike like vipers," she gasped, voice strained. "Fast, coordinated." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Yeah, well, let's see how they handle chaos." He slammed the ship sideways between 2 drifting hulks of old warships. The Wayfarer scraped so close against a broken cruiser's hull that sparks trailed in its wake. Plasma blasts followed, exploding against the wreckage and showering them with molten debris. The Kirath ships adjusted, flanking him tighter. Daniel hit a switch. The cargo bay opened, releasing a cloud of scavenged metal shards, rusted plating, broken turrets, even stripped engines. The debris scattered like a shotgun blast across the void. One Kirath interceptor plowed straight into it, its sleek hull shredding against the shrapnel. The ship spun out of control before erupting in a fiery burst. Lyra's lips parted in shock. "You weaponized junk." Daniel grinned, wild and sharp. "Scrap's all I've got, and I make it count." The remaining 2 interceptors split, one angling high, the other diving low, boxing them in. Daniel shoved the throttle, engines whining as the Wayfarer tore between broken spires of a Kirath battleship's skeletal frame. Bolts of plasma sizzled around them, so close Daniel could smell ozone through the filters. Lyra pressed harder, her hands glowing brighter against the console. The shield surged again, catching a direct hit that rattled Daniel's teeth. She gasped, her whole body trembling, but she refused to let go. "You're burning yourself out," Daniel warned, glancing at her pale face. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Better me than both of us." Another volley screamed past, too close. Daniel's instincts screamed back louder. He yanked the controls, spinning the Wayfarer in a reckless barrel roll through a gap no sane pilot would have tried. One Kirath hunter followed, overconfident. Its nose clipped the wreckage and split apart in a dazzling burst of fire. "2 down," Daniel muttered, his breathing ragged. "1 left." The final interceptor swung wide, charging weapons for a kill shot. It wasn't just aiming for them now. It was lining up a strike that would pierce the Wayfarer's core. Daniel's torpedo rack showed 1 missile left. 1 chance. He armed it, waited for the targeting reticle to lock. The hunter twisted, too fast for the salvager's system to keep pace. Daniel swore. Then Lyra's hand closed over his. Her voice was weak but certain. "Let me guide it." He hesitated, then released control. Her other hand touched the torpedo controls, light spilling from her fingertips. The targeting reticle flickered, then steadied, locked not on where the hunter was, but where it would be. "Fire," she whispered. Daniel hit the trigger. The torpedo streaked forward, trailing fire across the void. The Kyrath hunter tried to break away, engines screaming, but it was already too late. The missile curved unnaturally, chasing like a predator. A heartbeat later, it struck dead center. The hunter vanished in a storm of fire and shattered wings. Silence fell, broken only by the rasp of Daniel's breath and the dying groans of the Wayfarer's engines. Warning lights still painted the cockpit crimson. Shields flickered, barely holding. Daniel exhaled, adrenaline leaving him shaky. That's all of them, for now. Lyra slumped against the console, her glow dimming to faint sparks. Daniel caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her carefully into the co-pilot's seat. She was pale, trembling, but her eyes lifted to meet his. "You fight like chaos itself," she whispered. A tired grin tugged at his lips. "Chaos usually wins." Her eyelids fluttered shut, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Daniel checked her pulse. Steady, thank God. He turned back to the controls, pushing the Wayfarer away from the battlefield before reinforcements arrived. But in the back of his mind, one thought burned clear. If this was just a Kyrath scouting party, then the real storm was coming. And when it did, he'd need more than scrap tricks and reckless flying. For now, though, they were alive. Against the odds, against the hunters, they were alive. And Daniel Reeves was already thinking of what came next. The Wayfarer limped through the void, engines coughing smoke and sparks. Daniel pushed her hard, eyes fixed on the distant beacon of Haven Station. The outpost was a hidden sanctuary, orbiting a barren moon in neutral space. To outsiders, it was just scrap welded together, corridors stitched from old cruisers, hangars patched with mismatched plating. But to humanity, Haven was lifeline. Supply lines ran thin, fleets regrouped here, and officers plotted desperate defenses in its shadowed halls. As the Wayfarer docked, armed guards rushed forward, rifles ready. Daniel stepped down first, hands raised. Behind him, Lyra emerged slowly, cloak drawn over her shimmering skin. The station crew froze, unease spreading like wildfire. Humanity had seen too many alien conquerors. Trust was scarce. "What in hell did you drag in, Reeves?" one officer snapped. Daniel stood his ground. "She's not Kyrath. She's Elyndari," the word hung heavy. Murmurs rippled. Some didn't even believe that race had existed. Others remembered only grim legends, how the Kyrath had hunted them to extinction. Elyndari. Admiral Chen herself stepped forward, silver hair tied back, sharp eyes narrowing on Lyra. "Prove it." Lyra lowered her hood. The glow of her eyes lit the hangar, faint but undeniable. Some soldiers stepped back instinctively. Others muttered prayers. Chen's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Explain why you're here." Lyra's voice was calm but laced with sorrow. "Because the Kyrath wanted what my people guarded. And because he—" she glanced at Daniel, "chose not to leave me in chains." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She knows something they can't get. Something they're coming for." The Admiral motioned them into the war room. Holographic stars lit the chamber, lines marking collapsing front lines. Colonies burned red on the display, each a wound in humanity's defense. Lyra stepped forward, raising her hand. The hologram shifted as her touch fed it energy, reshaping the star map. At its center bloomed a dying sun, a vault hidden within its core. "Starvale," she said softly. "The last hope my people swore to protect. If the Kyrath reach it, this war ends, and not in your favor." The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel could see the doubt in their faces, the wariness. But Admiral Chen only said, "Then we find it first." Orders snapped across the room. Scouts were dispatched, ships prepared. Humanity's ragtag fleet would risk everything chasing a relic of a dead race. Later, in the quiet of the crew quarters, Lyra sat alone, staring at the faint glow of her hands. Daniel found her there, perched on a bench like a shadow. "You don't trust them," he said. She shook her head. "Why should they? I am the remnant of a people who failed to protect themselves. To them I am myth, not ally." Daniel leaned against the wall. "They'll come around. You just have to show them you're not the enemy." Her eyes lifted to his, fragile and searching. "Why do you trust me so easily?" Daniel thought about the graves he'd dug, the faces he'd carried out of burning colonies. Because every time we stop trusting, the Kirath win, and I'm done letting them win. Her lips curved faintly, the closest thing to a smile he'd seen from her yet. Within days, coordinates from Elyndar's shattered moon came through. Daniel and Lyra joined a small expedition. The wayfarer, patched and limping, led the way. Elyndar was nothing but ruins now. The once green world lay scorched, cities reduced to skeletal towers jutting from gray ash. The moon they landed on fared no better, its surface cracked with glassy scars where orbital strikes had melted the crust. As Lyra walked among the broken remains of her people's temples, Daniel stayed close, watching her shoulders tremble. She ran her fingers over a stone pillar, ancient glyphs carved deep. The words lit faintly at her touch. "This was my song," she whispered. "Our memory. Not written, not spoken, sung into stone, into light, into us." Daniel crouched beside her. "What does it say?" Her eyes glistened. "It points the way. The vault lies in the heart of a dying star." Before he could answer, the sound of engines echoed across the horizon. Distant streaks of light pierced the dark skies. Daniel's gut twisted. Kirath! Lyra clenched her fists, tears streaking her metallic skin. She looked back at the ruined temples, her voice raw. "I was ready to die here, to let their fire consume me with the rest." She turned toward him, fire rekindling in her eyes. "But you made me want to live again." Daniel touched her shoulder, steady and unyielding. "Then live, with us. We're not finished yet." Above them, Kirath warships descended, their shadows blotting out the shattered moonlight. The storm had found them. The void around Elyndar erupted into chaos. Dozens of Kirath warships warped in, their hulls gleaming black and jagged, like predators slicing through the stars. Humanity's fleet was waiting, smaller, battered, but burning with desperation. As soon as the Kirath appeared, space itself became fire. Explosions painted the darkness. Human destroyers launched volleys of railgun rounds, ripping through the shields of the first Kirath cruisers. The aliens answered with barrages of plasma that carved through frigates like paper. Fighters darted in swarms, dogfights leaving trails of shattered metal and fire. In the middle of it all, Daniel steered the Wayfarer like a madman. The ship had no right being in a battle like this, but it darted between lines of fire, hugging debris fields and weaving through the wreckage of fallen ships. Lyra was beside him, her glow steady now, feeding her strength into the systems with quiet determination. The Admiral's voice cut through the comms. "Reeves, you and the Elyndari head for the coordinates. We'll hold the line as long as we can. Don't waste the chance." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Copy that." "Don't die on me, Chen." The Wayfarer plunged toward the dying star system. Ahead, the vault shimmered faintly, cloaked within the gravitational storms of a collapsing sun. But the Kirath weren't blind. A massive carrier peeled away from the battle, releasing a wing of escorts to intercept. "Of course they know," Daniel growled. Lyra's eyes flared. "They can sense it, as I can. The vault calls to what remains of my people's essence. The warlord will not let us reach it." The Wayfarer punched through the storm, battered by gravitational surges. The hull groaned, lights flickering. Daniel gritted his teeth, forcing the ship closer. Finally, the vault came into view. A colossal structure of crystal and metal, hidden within the star's corona. Untouched by time, glowing with a serene brilliance, even as fire raged around it. But standing at the threshold was a monster. The Kirath warlord's dreadnought hovered like a shadow of doom. It was no ordinary ship. It was fused with his armor, a living extension of his power. When Daniel guided the Wayfarer into the vault chamber, the warlord was already waiting. He stepped forward, towering over them, clad in black armor that pulsed like molten stone. His voice rumbled like thunder. "Elyndari!" he snarled, eyes burning with cruel hunger. "You crawl back to claim what was never yours. Hand me the heart, and I may spare your human pet." Daniel leveled his rifle, though the gesture was laughable. "You'll have to kill me first." The warlord's blade flashed, a weapon of living energy. He swung with crushing force. Daniel fired, the shot sparking uselessly off the monster's armor. The strike hurled him across the chamber. He hit the floor hard, blood spilling down his face. Lyra screamed, the sound raw and shattering. Something inside her broke loose. The star veil pulsed at her call, threads of light unraveling from the vault walls and weaving into her body. The chamber roared with power, ancient Elyndari energy rising to meet its last guardian. The warlord charged, but Lyra rose, radiant and defiant, her entire form wrapped in luminous fire. Her voice rang like a bell of war. "You will not take this. Not while I still breathe." The warlord struck again, their clash shaking the vault. His blade seared with darkness, hers with light. Sparks exploded with each impact, the air itself tearing apart around them. Daniel dragged himself up, vision blurry, forcing his battered body back into the fight. He raised his rifle again, not because it would kill the warlord, but because Lyra wasn't fighting alone. Every shot he fired bought her a heartbeat more, a chance to strike deeper. Lyra seized that chance. With a cry that echoed through the vault, she unleashed the full force of Starveil. Light exploded outward, tearing through the warlord's armor, burning into his core. He howled, a sound that shook the star itself, before disintegrating into ash and sparks. The blast spread beyond the vault. Outside, the shield of Starveil unfurled like a radiant dome, protecting the human fleet from the Kyrath's final desperate strike. Plasma fire splashed harmlessly against its brilliance. Humanity's battered ships rallied, pushing forward with renewed fury, driving the Kyrath into retreat. Inside the vault, Lyra collapsed, the glow fading from her skin. Daniel staggered to her side, catching her before she hit the ground. She was trembling, her breaths shallow, but she smiled faintly through the pain. "You stood against him," Daniel said hoarsely. "You did it." Her hand touched his cheek, leaving a faint trace of light. "No, we did it." Outside, the void burned with victory. For the first time in years, the Kyrath had been forced back. But the cost of that defiance weighed heavy. Daniel held Lyra close, his battered body aching, his blood mingling with her glow. Around them, the vault pulsed with quiet light. No longer a secret weapon waiting to be stolen, but a shield now awakened. And for the first time in too long, humanity had hope. The vault was silent after the storm. Its walls of crystal still shimmered faintly, but the violent surges of power had faded into a calm, steady hum. Daniel knelt on the cold floor, holding Lyra against him. Her glow flickered like a dying ember, fragile yet stubbornly clinging to life. Outside, the battle was already over. The Kyrath fleet, stunned by the warlord's fall and the blinding burst of Starveil, had pulled back into the void, leaving behind their dead ships and the carcasses of broken machines. Humanity's survivors drifted in ragged formation, scarred but unbroken. For once, the galaxy had tilted in their favor. But inside the vault, the victory felt hollow. Daniel pressed his forehead against Lyra's, his voice rough. "Stay with me, please." "You don't get to leave, not after this." Her eyes fluttered open. They were dimmer now, but soft with warmth. "Daniel, I was not meant to survive the Starveil's call. It takes everything from us. That was why my people hid it away. We were never strong enough to wield it without breaking." "Then you let me carry it," Daniel snapped, his hand gripping hers. "We'll find a way. Humans don't give up, remember?" Lyra's lips curved in the faintest smile. "You already carry something greater. Stubbornness, hope. The fire to fight even when the universe tells you it's useless. That's why I found you. That's why this matters." The vault trembled faintly. At its center, a pillar of light rose, pulsing with energy like the heartbeat of a star. Lyra turned her gaze toward it. "The Starveil is awake now. It can shield your people, but it needs a guardian. Someone bound to it, someone who can pour their essence into its song." Daniel's stomach clenched. "No, you're not sacrificing yourself again." His voice cracked. "We just found each other." Her hand brushed his face, gentle despite her weakness. "And in you, I found something my kind never understood. Meaning, love, a reason to fight. Not just for survival, but for someone else." She drew a shaky breath, her glow brightening as if preparing for one last surge. "If I become part of the Starveil, it will endure. Humanity will endure. That is what matters." Daniel shook his head violently, but deep inside, he knew she was right. He'd seen too many friends die in this war, too many sacrifices made. But this wasn't just another death. It was a rebirth, the chamber filled with rising light. Lyra's body dissolved into threads of radiance, her hand slipping from his grasp even as her presence grew around him, filling the vault. Her voice echoed, not from her lips but from everywhere at once. "Do not grieve, Daniel. I am not gone. I am the shield around your people. I am the light in your sky." The beam of Starvale expanded, surging beyond the vault. Across the battlefield, human ships lit up with its glow. Their broken hulls mended, shields regenerated, weapons recharged. Pilots whispered in awe as their systems came alive again. Where there had been ruin, there was now strength. On the flagship, Admiral Chen stared wide-eyed. "My God! Reeves, what did you do?" Daniel stood in the heart of the vault, tears streaking his blood-stained face. His voice was hollow, ragged. "I didn't do anything." "She did." For hours, the fleet drifted in silence, soaking in the miracle. Wreckage floated quietly around them, Kyrath corpses burning in the void. Humanity had survived where they shouldn't have. Not because of numbers, not because of superior weapons, but because one Elyndari chose to stand with them instead of fading into legend. When the fleet finally set course back to human space, the news spread like wildfire. Soldiers spoke of a shield of light, of a human and an alien together turning the tide. They told the story of an Elyndari who gave her essence so that humanity might see another dawn. Daniel returned to his ship, the Wayfarer, now scarred beyond repair. He sat in the cockpit, staring at the endless stars. The seat beside him was empty, but faint traces of her glow lingered on the controls, as though she had left fingerprints of light behind. He closed his eyes, hearing her voice in memory. "We did it. Together." And in the distance, beyond human worlds and Kyrath lines, the Starvale pulsed. A beacon, a warning, a promise. The Kyrath would come again. Daniel knew it as surely as he knew his own heartbeat. But next time, they wouldn't find a broken people clinging to scraps of hope. They would find humanity shielded by light, united by sacrifice, and carrying the fire of both man and Elyndari. Daniel opened his eyes, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "You gave me meaning too, Lyra, and I'll make damn sure it counts." The Wayfarer lifted from the vault, joining the fleet as it moved toward the stars. War still raged across the galaxy, but in its vast, merciless dark, a new legend had been born, a human scavenger, an Elyndari exile, and the light they left behind.